I mean, this is a lot of tool for 15 bucks. But as far as a violence to dollar ratio, the angle grinder is really good. You can really hurt yourself with one of these.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm not trying that.
When your people need your attention, let your vision be your guide. But if your money be your leader, then your power be divided.
You never just buy one thing at Harbor Freight. We needed some dollies.
Okay.
I got the Warrior.
Oh God.
My favorite thing on the back of this box so far is, due to continuing improvements, actual product may differ slightly from photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, actual product may vary
Your
from photo.
Tinder bio.
Yeah. All right, in today's video, we are exploring the idea of the metalworker's right-hand man. The first tool many probably acquire, find, borrow, or steal to begin their exploration in the world of metalworking. Naturally, we got to thinking, how cheap of an angle grinder can you get? And then what do you get for that cheapness? So, I went to Harbor Freight and spent $14.99 of my own money to buy the Warrior, a 4.3 amp slide switch angle grinder that doesn't even come with a grinding wheel, and it comes with a wrench. Oh, it is really tiny. Oh, that's a bad cord.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I'll show you the very first thing you should do when you unbox your angle grinder. You will notice every angle grinder comes with this semicircular piece of metal that is meant to protect you from debris, sparks, and potentially exploding wheels. Now, I'm not telling you to do this, but I am saying that the quality of my metalworking life has always been greatly improved upon the removal and immediate disposal of the guard. I say that for many reasons, and there's not a single metalworker I know that doesn't also advocate for the removal, modification, or disposal of the guard. Steve's modification here of this guard illustrates one of the biggest problems with the guard, in that in many cases it's in the way. So what Steve did was cut his down so that theoretically it could still somewhat perform its duties. Because like if you keep the stock guard on, you usually have to move it around for every cut, which as you just saw isn't that easy to do, because I have to, at least this one has like a cam lock type deal. But I'm going to remove it, just like every other angle grinder I own no longer has the guard. So step one, modify the guard. I would say step two is maybe put this handle somewhere, but in most cases you will not find a use for it. Aaron, have you ever found your life to be improved by the addition of this handle?
Not on a 4.5 inch.
Yeah. Either?
I would agree. If it's a big 6 inch.
Yeah. That was gonna be my opinion, was that this is typically for when you really wanna hog into something.
You'll see on the top of the angle grinder, there's a thread for it.
Yeah.
So you can go vertical with it.
Yeah, there's one there.
Yeah, I like it in that scenario.
Like this. Yeah. That's not bad. So yeah, I would not throw this away, but I would, not attach it right away. I like the bare tool, no guard, no handle, because you never really know where you want to end up with it. This here, by the way, I brought this one out because this is like a 10 or 11-year-old Cobalt brand angle grinder. Dad bought this from Lowe's forever ago, and I basically stole it from him when I moved out of the house. And it still works great. The aluminum transmission housing is cracked. The cord has been repaired several times. The strain relief is coming out of the body, but it keeps kicking. And it's not huge. It is paddle switch, and the lock works well, so you can lock it. I doubt Cobalt makes this same model anymore. I think my point with this was to illustrate, sometimes you win the lottery. Sometimes a $20, $25 tool will just not die. Whereas I've bought expensive tools that die almost immediately. So there is somewhat of a Chinesium lottery out there to be played. This could either be trash tomorrow or be part of my tool collection for a very long time. There's no way to tell other than putting it to work. This one's got a paddle switch, which is, I don't know, this is definitely a personal preference type thing. I tend to like a paddle switch. The Milwaukee has a paddle switch, but I will say it took me a while to get used to that because the safety switch kind of goes the opposite way. This one goes down in a natural movement.
They're all a little bit learning curves. If you switch back and forth between them, like DeWalt's feels really unnatural to me.
Yeah.
That one, it took me a minute, but now it feels great.
I love Milwaukee's paddle switches. And this is just, you're holding the tool tightly, so a paddle switch is aimed to take advantage of the force you're already squeezing the grinder with. A dead man switch, yeah. You let go of it, i.e. die, not that you would. But then there's this type, which is the push up and down and it will lock on until otherwise acted upon again. The grinders that I have that have these switches, I tend to use for flap wheel material removal type stuff, because things that where you would have the grinder's gonna be on for a while, it's nice to just set that and forget it and not have to hold it here. I can hold it here, I can hold it here, I can move my hand around and it's always gonna be on. Problem with these that I've found is that sometimes you hit them on things and they just turn off. And then of course there is the prospect of, well, if you drop it, it's not gonna turn itself off. So, you know, there's choose your own adventure with that. This one in particular feels like a very cheap switch. And I think, to quote AVE, the thing about a tool that usually fails is the part that the 800-pound gorilla interacts with. Or 300-pound gorilla, whatever he says.
It's the 200-pound gorilla.
One other thing about those is they can be on when you plug it in.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the option of past negligence, this may be turned on, or left on. Yeah, it'll
Dances around.
slices its own cord off. I guess part three, the third thing to think about with angle grinders is pick your switch. Pick how you'd like to interact with the tool, because I would argue that's the biggest thing, that's the biggest filter term when you're searching for grinders. Do you want a rat tail with a trigger? Do you want a paddle switch? Or do you want a toggle switch, a slide and push type switch?
Do you think that's a bigger decision than corded versus cordless?
Yeah, I really like corded grinders because I don't have to change batteries. Batteries lose effectiveness the more you charge and discharge them. This is quite a bit lighter than this whole package with this giant battery on it. But you do have the prospect now of an extension cord or a cord reel in the ceiling like we have here. But once it's plugged up and if you're doing something in one place, it's not really an issue. Whereas these are great if you gotta run across the shop and chop something to length on the rack, or obviously mobile. You know, if you do a lot of jobs out away from your shop, working out the back of a truck, you know, a Milwaukee M18 system or the DeWalt stuff or whatever. Personal fan of Milwaukee here. But I don't know, each job has their thing. I personally, if I'm doing material removal, grinding, or like with a flap wheel or a grinding disc, I will bias more towards the corded grinder. Whereas if I'm doing cutting operations, I will use the cordless grinder because I think you're just running it for less time, and I like the mobility when cutting. Cutting can often require you to put your grinder in more different positions as opposed to material removal or grinding, in my opinion. Cordless is always more expensive because not only is there more technology happening in here, like smart battery, what am I looking for? Things that monitor the battery, because with lithium ion batteries, you don't want to discharge them past a certain point because it damages the battery. So you're gonna have smart stuff in here for that. Look, by the way, go subscribe to AVE on YouTube. He does super in-depth teardowns of power tools, which are super fun to watch. He'll tell you how they work, but there's more technology in a cordless grinder. Plus, you then have to invest in a battery ecosystem. And these damn batteries are so expensive. Even the Hercules ones from Harbor Freight. The battery is oftentimes the more expensive part of the tool. Like, I think this bare tool was like 80, 90 bucks, whereas this battery is like $150 or more. This high output one's 200 bucks. So it's really, cordless tools are more about the battery ecosystem build out than the actual tool. Whereas a corded grinder, you know, if you're in a shop, you've got 110, at least in the US. This thing comes with everything you need to power it, the plug.
Would that run off of a basic wall outlet in somebody's house?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, these draw 4.3 amps. So most circuit breakers are 15 amp. For a residential situation, most 110 outlets are 15 amps. In a shop situation, if it's been built to be a shop, you'll find 20 amp breakers probably.
But if somebody's just like setting up in their home garage.
Yeah, you could run this off the same outlet that you run your toaster off of. In fact, at least if the fire marshal is to be believed, the microwave and the refrigerator pull more power from the wall than this thing does. One other thing that I do with my grinders is a common failure point is the strain relief on the cord. As you can see on this one, it's been pulled out of something in there. I haven't cracked it apart. I am typically not one to grab this cord and wrap it like this, because it puts all this crazy strain on the strain relief. And I know the name should suggest that it would relieve that strain, but this is just a cheap piece of heat shrink. This is one of those things that when you buy a Fine or a Hilti, like you'll see little things like the cord quality, the strain relief. Things are just gonna feel better and be better. Cord length. I learned this from my friend Zach, who used to work in Broadway on stage build out stuff. I tend to fold the cord in half and then fold it in half again, and then tie that in a knot. This is just my personal preference. So you have your cord managed, but you have no strain on the strain relief when it's stored away. That's one kind of little tip and trick there that I use all the time. And then, like, the other thing about grinders is your consumables. If you're local to Roanoke, I get a partner, shout out to Robbie Skelton from Virginia Abrasives. We get everything through him. In your town, you likely have somebody who is an abrasives rep that'll go around to the metal shops and whatnot. So I happen to use a lot of CGW stuff, which is Camel grinding wheels. I like their cutoff wheels because I like a thinner kerf. The kerf is the thickness of the cutter. So this is an 0.35 inch cutting wheel, which is a lot thinner than a lot of the ones you get normally. This is the thickness of wheel that you find, well, at Harbor Freight and a lot of, you know, Lowe's and Home Depot, big box stores, which is a 0.45. I like the thinner kerf. A thinner kerf implies that you have to remove less material, so you typically can cut through things faster. The only problem with a thin kerf cutoff wheel is that they are more fragile. So you have to be very mindful of not reorienting the wheel once you've begun to cut into your material, because then it'll just break and explode. Which, if you're worried about that, you can leave the guard on. That is one of those things that I'm extremely conscious of. Once you start your cut, you do not change the orientation of the cutter, at least with a cutoff wheel in it. So you have cutoff wheels, you have flap discs. These particular ones are for aluminum, which is why they're white, but this is a pretty standard flap disc. It's just a disc made up of, well, flaps, but interleaved sanding disc. There's many names for these. I typically will bounce back and forth between cutting and flap wheel. The third kind of wheel is sort of your standard just grinding wheel. This is the kind of wheel that most of these tools come with. Most angle grinders come with something like this. It's a coarse, like composite or ceramic grinding wheel. It's just meant for crude material removal. You can cut, but that's the amount of material you have to remove to cut. So it's really not meant for cutting. It's meant for grinding, you know, beveling, changing the shape of stuff. These are cheap as hell, and I hate them so much, but they do something. I tend to go toward a coarse flat disc over something like this. Or these are called roundeliers, where it says it, but these are from Tierlet. It's a conical composite grinding wheel. They are super loud, but I find that these do a better job removing material than these old school sort of composite wheels. They're thinner, they are beveled, because when you hold your grinder, you don't hold it flat, you usually hold it like this. So the bevel means that you have a better contact surface. And then a few special case stuff. We have started to use these type of things around here, which is a rubberish plastic backer with an interchangeable sanding wheel. You can buy these, you know, in bulk. They are really nice for final finishing, grinding your welds down, making it really smooth. It allows you to try to mitigate digging in when you're removing a weld, you can kind of polish it flat a lot easier. So we've used those a lot. But working out your consumables and your abrasives, I would argue is a bigger part really to make your angle grinder ownership a better experience than the tool itself. And you can see over here, I've got a pile of stuff. So I've got an old Porter cable that I bought that from Aaron actually a while ago when he had the making foundation. Did you like this one? I have one of these at home too.
I kind of do.
Yeah. So this is a rat tail. They call this style a rat tail, where it has this skinny part that comes off the back. It's got just a trigger.
I do like a trigger.
Yeah.
And that style works better with a handle as well.
Yeah, this is a nice one for material removal, or in this case we have a wire wheel set up to remove dross from the backside of our plasma cut parts. That's another thing that this is really good for. This came from Aaron too, I think. This was an old Hitachi. Same trigger style, but it's on the side instead of the top, as opposed to the Harbor Freight one. Again, smaller tool, lighter duty. I wouldn't do material removal with this. It's more for, I mean, we got a cutoff wheel on it now. Gosh, this DeWalt is probably 25 years old. I got this from my uncle's shop. This is probably a 1990s tool. Still in good shape though. I mean, paddle switch with this weird like hold button back here. You push it in and let go and it holds the paddle on, and then you push down and release. This one's on borrowed time. I expect it to fail at any point. It hasn't yet, so shout out to DeWalt in the 90s, the DW402. You guys can let me know if they make that. Anyway, same, this old Makita, a lot of side switch stuff. Yeah. Sounds like an angle grinder. Okay, I'll show you one of my angle grinder bad habits. I'm not exactly gonna tell you to do this. So they all come with this spanner wrench. So there's a stop on the back usually, that if you push it in and turn this, it'll drop in, and that locks the arbor. So now you can undo that, put your wheel on, and then tighten that down. And then you're supposed to take this, put it in two of the holes, and tighten it while you hold this. And now it's locked.
But if you're not familiar, it's super easy to get that slightly off when you tighten it down too, if you don't use a grinder a whole lot.
Right.
And that could be wildly dangerous.
Okay, yeah, so one thing to make sure of is that all of these grinding wheels work off of this. By the way, this nut is two-sided for a reason. So all of these arbors are 7/8, and there's a little lip right here. So it's really easy to slap this on and have it not be hub centric. So you want to push this down until it slides over that. See that? Mm-hmm. They all have this little hub that's meant to lock in. So that's a good point. If you get that off, which is again very easy to do, I put that on, tighten that down. God, this scares me just doing it. I'm not gonna turn it on. But look, I didn't take the time to center it over that ring. And this would cause lots of problems if I turn this on right now. You wanna see it? No, I'm not gonna do it without gloves on.
Same with if the nut is on it backwards and then you have play.
So, right, this nut, when the nut has when you have a thin wheel on here, you use the concave side of the nut. When you have a thick wheel on like this, you're meant to take this nut and flip it around so that this raised portion goes into the other side of this wheel. And that gives you more of a hub to hold that down. You can do it wrong if you put this thing upside down with a thin wheel on. See, look, now I put it on upside down, tightened it. That's not tightened down. How to change the wheel, right? Step 1, lock the arbor. Step 2, make sure this is centered, because this has a slotted engagement on the back where if you're not careful, that can become dislodged. Lock that in. Figure out if you're putting a thin wheel or a thick wheel on. Put your wheel on, center it on the hub. Make sure you use the concave side for the thin wheel and the convex side for a thick wheel. My finger's still on the arbor lock. Thread that down. Make sure this is centered, okay? You should have this turn the arbor when you turn it. And then, if you're new, use this. Tighten it down. Now, let off of that, and you're ready to go.
Also, good practice to do that before you plug it in typically. If you're new, if you're not super familiar with it, And two, lots of room for error throughout the net. And that's why I prefer not using that tool, because it gives me more contact in feeling that I know that's seated. There's less room for error when I use my hand instead of the tool.
Well, so that's what I was about to touch on, is my bad habit, which talk to any experienced metal worker, I would argue that they do not use this tool. And so what I do is I'll put my wheel on, my finger is still on the arbor lock, I'll run this down, I'll make sure it's centered, and then I will grab the wheel and turn it. You can feel it tighten. And the reason that doesn't worry me is because this thing is spinning against the thread. So if I were to turn this on and apply load, the motor is trying to tighten the nut as it goes. It's not spinning the other way. So I will demonstrate to you a rather bad practice. I'll show you what I mean. I'm just gonna turn that on like that. The motor spinning up turned the threads inside the nut, and the nut's angular momentum prevented it from spinning immediately, which brought it straight down to threads. And now this is tight. I can break it loose. No, I can't. I need the tool. So that tightened it really fast. But you get my point. That was to illustrate how the motor is working with the nut. It's not gonna come off.
Don't try that at home, by the way.
Do not try that at home. And then,
You always need a nut?
no, you do not always need a nut. Nice setup. It's like a cooking show. Bam! Some abrasives are threaded, in which case, take this, put it somewhere safe, but you can just thread on the abrasive itself. You leave the backside on, but you don't need the front. So yeah. Everyone, Davis Barker. You've seen him on the channel before. $15 angle grinder. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like an angle grinder.
Sounds pretty good. I try not to with angle grinders. Excuse me. I don't have to mess with angle grinders. No, I've not tried that.
And look, now it's That was tight.
But hey, you ever turn something on before it's locked in? You turn this like really high spinning blade on before you lock it in?
You ever tried that?
I already tried that.
If people don't know this, they should. You were quite the Milwaukee fan.
I'm big. I bleed red.
Well,
Yeah, most people will.
most people do.
Oh yeah. I need to come with a new slogan.
I mean, this is a lot of tool for 15 bucks. But as far as a violence to dollar ratio, the angle grinder is really good. You can really hurt yourself with one of these.
Oh yeah.
And so don't. Take every precaution to not. Gloves is like a personal preference. I tend to wear gloves because it's cut resistant, it's spark stolen toward your hand, you know, second layer of skin. But without gloves, you have a better feel of what's going on. So that's up to you.
I never did like those big, bulky leather gloves.
Yeah. All right, I got a 035 curve cutoff wheel. We're just gonna slice through some 1/2 inch round bar. I felt a lot of slop. There's definitely a lot of slop in like the gearbox. That's actually quite a bit. That's the first like sort of red flag I'm feeling from this $15 angle grinder. But I would, I don't know. Hear that? I mean, it works. I do like how light it is. This small one is very light. I would use this for light duty stuff. It does exactly what I thought it was gonna do. So the point I think with this that I wanted to explore is that like a cheap angle grinder is way better than some other cheap versions of tools. Like it's a great tool to cheap out on because there's only so much that can go wrong. Although a lot of the reviews did say that this one caught on fire and let the smoke out. But I would argue that those were probably cases where they were pushing it harder than it was meant to be pushed.
Right, using it for hours and hours on end.
Like, all right, look, I've been a welder for 15 years and an angle grinder has always been in one of my hands a lot. I have almost nothing but cheap angle grinders around me. I think the most expensive angle grinder I have is this one. And like I said, that's mainly because it's cordless. Like this one couldn't have cost more than 20, 30 bucks 10 years ago from Lowe's, and it's still great. Will that one last 10 years? I highly doubt it. But for 15 bucks, I mean, hell, you tip more than that at a restaurant. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
I'm not underwhelmed, I'm not overwhelmed, I'm just whelmed. So anyway, those were some tips and tricks on angle grinders, what happens when you buy the cheapest one available, and a look at ours and my overall thoughts. Have fun, be safe, always wear protective eyewear, earwear, and some gloves. Tighter gloves are better than loose gloves so they don't get whatever. But protect yourself because you can hurt yourself with one of these, but you can also make yourself a lot of money. Good luck. Like and subscribe if you're into it. If not, that's cool. But also join our Patreon for ad-free videos a day early and all sorts of other stuff. Features, benefits, behind the scenes, blooper reels, live streams,